So I think we'll get started, if you'll settle in. Be sure, well, at some point to help yourself to the supplies and handouts and paper over here. You'll need it for later on. Take as many stickies as you desire. Well, welcome to Classism 101. Reverend Mary and I and Ann Hundley are going to be helpers today to get us started in a conversation. And first, of course, we'd like to light a chalice. And the words are provided by Eric Walker Wickstrom. We light this chalice for all who are here and all who are not, for all who have ever walked through our doors, for those who may yet find this spiritual home, and for those we can't even yet imagine. For each of us and for us all, may this flame burn warm and bright.
So good afternoon. My name is Ann Hundley. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm really grateful to be with you all here this morning, starting this conversation. So my personal background, I figured out as an adult that first kind of learned the concept that I come from a upper middle class experience. And so I've learned through this process that some of the habits and assumptions that I have, that I carry, have hurt people that I love. So I'm here to be learning with you all to learn other ways. So what we're going to be doing together in this hour is, so let's see, we're going to hear a personal reflection about one person's experience. And then you're going to get a brief overview of classism. You'll hear a novice presenting basic what classism is. And then we'll invite you to do some personal reflecting on your experience, and if you have the opportunity to share if you'd like. And then we'll be looking at what you use are doing, thinking about ways to move forward together in this work. So at the end, we'll have a short little sliver of time for question and answers, but it's mainly ongoing work that we're bringing this lens together. And so right now we're going to jump into, let's see, I forgot to show you this. That's about assumptions. So should that still be up there for you?
That's fine, yeah, sure. Sure. It's all about assumptions, absolutely. My name is Tim Ransom, and my pronouns are he, him. And I thought I would share a story with you today. It's a heck of an act to follow after today's sermon, especially Tessa's wonderful education for us all. But last Sunday, Reverend Mary introduced us to this month's theme of story, and began her sermon with 3 different stories of the West that varied according to whether they were of the natives who had been on the land for thousands of years, of the Mexicans who were already citizens of another nation when that was taken away from them, or of the Johnny-come-lately settlers who did the taking. Now I'd like to tell you a story that begins on the East, one of the most class-conscious parts of the country I know. It's my story, and of course it begins with my parents. My dad was the son of a middle-class upstate New Yorker who was an upwardly mobile small business owner that died a wealthy death, as a wealthy man. Mom was from an affluent New England Huguenot family and had been brought up as a proper young lady, which has its very strong meaning, a debutante who went to finishing school, and before marrying, spent several years abroad soaking up European culture and in the company of patrician young men. She wore her class on her sleeve. I experienced Mom's social biases and strong ethnocentrism as she brought me up, while Dad went to work as a chemist at DuPont. She was condescending, though benevolent, to the black women she hired as maids, and intolerant of my efforts to associate with kids she thought of as from the wrong side of the tracks, my working class and Jewish friends predominantly. And when the time came, I hung out at the country club and attended dance class and coming out parties, proudly sporting the Madras tuxedo that she bought me. When it came to my education, Mom and Dad's motivations were different. Mom's social, Dad's economic, but they agreed that college and probably graduate school were the way to go. But first, high school was a problem. In Virginia then, high school was beset with the social and political mayhem of pending integration. And my parents were concerned about the nature of the education and socialization that I would receive. So in 1961, they sent me away to Phillips Exeter Academy, the top prep school in the nation. The education there and at Williams College to follow was top-notch, but it came at an amazing social and psychological price. Among other things, I was surrounded by a wellspring of classism. My fellow students were offspring of the wealthy professional classes, lawyers, doctors, bankers, government workers, and were mostly from the center of the universe, that is, the Northeast. They were snobs, and most of them were white, and all of them were male. Elitism and sexism were rampant. At the same time, though, my drift away from the classism and racism of my parents actually began on those campuses. An intense emphasis on learning to learn and think for myself led me to seek my own path and question in new ways. For example, when a bunch of us social misfits at Williams were rushed by a declining fraternity, the pinnacle of old boy snobbery, we disbanded that organization immediately thereafter. And the few BIPOC people I saw on and off campus in roles of respectability, authority, and honor made me think. The preordained academic pathway I was on led to a PhD program at Berkeley. But by then I was ready for the new social world that was California in the mid-1960s. Berkeley was a true melting pot of cultures, ethnicities, races, and sexes. And there I embarked on a series of explorations that expanded my awareness of class issues and attitudes. Exposure to the politics of the anti-war movement and the social freedoms of the times initiated a long-lasting rebellion against my upbringing and parents' attitudes that began with my taking on the life of a hippie, with all its trappings, communal living, marijuana, motorcycles, and headbands and beads. I was close to dropping out of the PhD program when I jumped at the opportunity to go to Africa to study primate social behavior and so escape the politics and class-based culture of my homeland. As a minority white in Africa, I found myself immersed in a world run by people of color who were trying to reclaim power as quickly as possible from the intensely classist colonial whites that had oppressed them for so long. It was very exhilarating. When it was time to return home, it was obvious that academics were not my thing, and I jumped ship. Next stop was the San Juan Islands in 1973, where I lived for 15 years in an environment that offered both an escape from the oppressiveness of mainline white capitalist culture and a community that supported self-reliance and self-exploration based upon shared values that brought people together. I was still a hippie, but now one that could explore new ways of contributing to the society that I was becoming part of. Finally, the most recent, and for me, the most potent, step was to move to Olympia in 1991, and then, with Melanie, search out a community in which I could continue to grow and divest myself of old habits of classist and racist behavior. This, of course, was OUUC, and eventually the opportunities provided by the coming of the residents of Camp Quixote, the homeless tent camp our congregation hosted starting in 2007, when I was president of the board. Well, I think that OUUC still has much to do to become a truly welcoming congregation, to divest ourselves, me as much as anyone, of the vestiges of us versus them, classism. I am proud to say that with Camp Quixote, we received into our midst some of our neighbors and a part of our society that most of us had never experienced and in our ignorance feared. Really, without having the least idea of what we were taking on, we welcomed the 40 street people of Camp Quixote into our midst and accepted the challenges of all kinds that they brought, financial, legal, political, but especially emotional and spiritual. I'm so proud to say that we stepped up together to do so. I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you all on how issues around the differences in wealth, work, income, education, family, race, and even politics prevent us from being truly welcoming to one another. Perhaps we will even find another opportunity like the one Camp Quixote brought us to challenge us together. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to jump into a little definition of classism, and this is from Susan Zelber. She has a PhD in the Midwest, a Unitarian, who's created this curriculum that I drew from in my preparation for today. So her definition is, right here, the systemic assignment of worth or access to power based on social class. And we'll give a rough definition of social class in a minute. Similar to other isms, it comes down to prejudice plus power. It's a form of discrimination, which is the outcome of prejudice being acted out with power, resulting in devaluing, restricted opportunities, and violence toward members of the people without power. At the institutional level, it's the policies and practices set up to benefit more class-privileged people at the expense of others. Excuse me. And she goes on to say that class issues are not outside of us, they live within us. Class awareness creates communities in which people from all social classes feel understood and valued. She quotes this is all her quote, but she says, Reverend Susan Lynch says that we have more class diversity in our congregations than we can see, as class experience can be invisible and we can be unaware of its impacts. So it's so personal. Like why invisible? We talked about those. Getting to hear Tessa's talk today. These split-second decisions we make. So in looking for a rough definition of class, personally, I got a little overwhelmed. So just this is very rough working definition for today, thanks to the help of Microsoft's AI Copilot. So very rough, just to put it into context. But so they're saying that social class in the U.S. is a hierarchy, and the components are often wealth and income. So if we have this hierarchy, wealth, we're talking about the amount of money. So if it's enough to be in investments, things called property, and then money, and the middle lower, not having enough money to meet your needs would be considered lower. lowest. And then the second one, level of education. So the level of education someone has the opportunity to complete impacts their job opportunities. So higher education, the top, high school diploma or GED would be somewhere in the middle, and then no GED. And then next one, thinking about occupation. The top would be considered higher class professions like doctors, lawyers, executives, typically seen as kind of associated with higher class. Range from middle, working class, working poor, not simple to name. Jobs referred to as unskilled labor would be associated with lower class. And then the bottom was the fourth one, social status. So that includes the idea of prestige, which again, I had to look that one up to articulate. So the level of respect or admiration someone receives, I'll say for people that don't know them, just like these are common, what we might say general public. Often, so who is going to get assumption of reputation for high quality, success, social influence, can be affected by family background and social networks, to being treated with disregard. As it's helpful to hear Tessa's story today about her experience. So these four components can interact in complex ways. That's a quick working overview of social class, the hierarchy. And then after thinking about that hierarchy, we can look at this wheel of power and privilege. So it's on the back of your sheet. So it shows different categories that people experience advantage and oppression in. So the center, the power refers to systemic advantages. I'd say formal support. Identities at the center are closest to that power. Classism can be directly seen with the wealth section on the left, that lavender next to the blue. And then also the formal education. I'll just go back to wealth, sorry, but in the middle, rich, closest to power. Middle class, poor being on the margins. And then going to that, between the yellow and the darker orange is formal education. So post-secondary, closest to authority, decision-making power, high school education, elementary education, farthest on the margins. The other sections impact occupation and social status. So I'm gonna now, we're gonna hear invitation from Reverend Mary.
Thank you so much, Tim and Anne, for joining together to do this today. I'm Reverend Mary, and I use she, her pronouns. And now we'd like to invite you into a time of personal reflection. And there's paper and pencil here. For those who are joining us online, I invite you to find whatever you might want or need to have to write some things down if that's something that works for you, or draw, or whatever that is. And this invitation is because when we know our own story, when we're in touch with our own story, we can welcome all the parts of our story, including the parts that might be painful. And it helps us open our hearts and minds to the stories of others. So we know ourselves, and then we can work to know others. I just want to acknowledge that this might be hard for some people. As Tess shared this morning, there are really challenging parts of our story, no matter what our economic class is. Tim shared some of that in his reflection as well. And so Whether you choose to engage with us or not is totally up to you, and if there's support that you would like or appreciate, give a high sign and we'll be there. So there's some questions. These are the questions we're going to invite you to reflect on, or other questions if you choose. We'll take about 10 minutes to do that, and as a part of that, if you wish, we invite you to write a word or a phrase on the sticky notes. There's lots of sticky notes. Take a whole pad if you want them. So write a word or a phrase, a part of an insight or something that was meaningful to you, or something maybe from the wheel that is powerful, that you just want to kind of add to our montage of what we're doing in our work together. For those on site, we're going to ask you to put your sticky notes up on the butcher paper here, and we'll read a few of them when we're done. My plan is to see what we have and what's shared and probably do something with that for the Spark next week. And for the folks online, we invite you to share something in the chat as you wish, a few words or a phrase, and I'll also read some of those. We'll eventually share those on the screen here so that we can read a few of them. So the questions we're asking of you are, where do you place yourself on the wheel of power and privilege? So that colorful wheel you have on the back of your handout, if you don't have a handout, give a high sign and we'll get you one. Oh, we got a few folks. Okay, we'll make sure. If you want to ask, yeah, Rosie, thank you, to make some copies. All right. Well, you far exceeded our expectations and attendance, so yay you. Exactly. So where do you place yourself on the wheel? In any of those factors, you might want to start with class, or income and education if you are so inclined. What are the strengths of where you place yourself? And what are the challenges of where you place yourself? And then last, how can considering class and classism be helpful regarding the people and things that you care about and how you interact with them? So is that making some sense, what we're asking folks to do? Any questions about that?
Can you repeat what's on the sticky note?
Repeat what's on the sticky note. So put on the sticky note anything that you would like to share that stands out to you. So it might be an insight you had, it might be a word that really resonates with you, might be an image that is important to you. So just something that's like, oh, I just learned this, or oh my goodness, this just is staying with me, or something like that. Does that help? Yeah. Any other questions or worries? We're going to take about 10 minutes for this. Anything else? Okay, I invite you then into some time for personal reflection. Carbon, is it possible to put the wheel up? Would that be, or the wheel and the questions at the same time? I'm just going to ask a technological miracle here to see if that can happen. Carbon is just amazing, I'm just saying, so. Oh my goodness, look at that. And if you're willing and you have one of the handouts, to share it with maybe somebody next to you who doesn't.
There is a fourth question. Right now, he's getting the fourth question.
I think he's fine. Carbon, you're amazing, thank you.
Raise
So if you folks are struggling a little bit with the wheel, so one of the ways people interact with the wheel of power and privilege is put a dot where you are in any particular place. So on the wheel of wealth, I would put myself probably on the line between middle class and rich. And then on education, I would put myself on post-secondary. And then when you have dots where you are, you can connect them and see what it looks like around the center of power, if you care to do that. Does that help a little bit? Yes. All right. Sorry about that. Thank you, Tim.
What time do you think we should go to on this?
I think it was a little bit, it was about 18 minutes till a little bit after the 8, so maybe a
And
little
this
bit
is
after the
10?
10.
Okay. Good.
Maybe a little longer, because we have till 1:15 if you want it. So.
Right.
I'm trying to do the same thing.
Really? You'll get into it.
I'm sure I will. If that's the worst that happened today, we're good.
Really?
What's with the sticky notes or the chat? So what you might write on the sticky note is an insight that you had, or something that's meaningful to you, or something that you're wrestling with. And then, I'm sorry, practically, physically what you do with a sticky note. It goes up here. I'm sorry, Jean, I was...
I have a little line.
Sorry, we'll take just another couple minutes and then come back together. So maybe one more minute to finish up any stickies you want to share, and you're welcome to add to the stickies anytime, even as we're going. So I'd like to share a few of these that are on site, and Carbon, I would ask if it's possible then to share the chat. It's not a hurry for you to do that. I'll read these first and then we'll go to the online. So we have disregard. Do I? Born in a clear hierarchy as an army brat, generals, colonels, officers, enlisted men, macho culture, no ethnic diversity. That resonates with some folks. The opposite of poverty is not wealth, it is justice, powerful. Being present, sharing, listening, open, learning. My wheel circle is very lopsided. Yeah. Self-culture is no longer considered a good. I'm not sure I know what that means. If there's anybody who would want to, yeah.
Well, just reacting to some of the things I'm hearing in church and elsewhere. For instance, body type is very complicated. My sister is a very large person and has tried her whole life to lose weight and doesn't seem to be able to. So I feel that it's good that she continues to work at that, because if she didn't, she'd probably be even larger than she is. So ideas like that, it's complicated, and it comes partly from my study of the Transcendentalists. Emerson felt that his entire life was dedicated to encouraging people toward self-culture, which is, when I look at myself, I feel a failure in that regard, but it doesn't stop me from wanting to be a better person each day. So just some ideas.
Thank you, Frank. So this idea that we hold the paradox within ourselves. We are perfect as we are, and we could use a little bit of help. All at the same time, yeah? Okay, great. And then is there stuff in the chat, Carbon, that we might be able to share a little bit of? Okay. Great. Dehumanization of different wealth class, not just from higher to lower, but also lower to higher, leading to violence. Power and privilege, allow, demand, responsibility, exactly. Why does a gay man have more power than a gay woman? Right. It's intersectional, right? Yeah. Pervasive sexism in the middle of a surprising number of contradictions. Yep, on the wheel. Yeah, great. Great. I want to thank you for engaging with this. This was a short bit of time to dip into a really big topic. One of the things we'll want to hear from you is what would be helpful for further exploration. So thank you for this. And again, if anyone wants to chat, we'll be around. And I want to turn it over to you, Tim, then to talk about what's next.
Thank you, Mary. So we thought now we start talking a little about what we can do about this. And of course, that's a lifetime conversation and has more facets to it than we can imagine. But I thought we might want to start with just the term social justice, which we use a lot around here. In those of us that are in part of the Faith in Action group that is trying to work on some of the aspects of classism and justice. and particularly about the impacts of classism and racism and other isms on how we on our society and how we can respond to them. For me, it really comes down to how we trust each other, in one-on-one relationships. How we treat one another in one-on-one relationships, in groups, and in our institutions. Classism, indeed the very purpose of classism, is to create and maintain extreme inequality in our relationships to the benefit of one or more representatives of a class. The work of social justice is to identify and eliminate classism or prejudice and abuse of power based on class in ourselves, in our culture, and in our structures. The goal of social justice is to provide equality for everyone, period. I'm sure that we can all think of examples of inequality all around us, as you have been doing, as we have been hearing all day, in our community and at large. Lack of universal health care. Think of the impacts of that on those who have and those who do not have or don't have enough. Access to sufficient medical care is dependent on wealth and other facets of class, like the educational level. Then insufficient minimum wage and insufficient income. Our capitalist society is set up so that there are those and those without. And it's a downward spiral constantly. And in turn, lack of sufficient income impacts people's health and educational opportunities. So we're in a spiral. Lack of access to education, which in a cascading effect impacts income, health, and social status in general. So again, one more piece of the wheel that you were looking at earlier. And disenfranchisement, depriving citizens of the ability to participate in the elections that determine the direction that their society is to take. We know the history of some of that, but do we know how much of that we hear, but how much is going on today in classist groups preventing others from proper access to votes in their world? These methods of exerting class superiority, combined in our society with the methodologies of racism and white supremacy, all but guarantee the inequality and suffering that is pervasive in our society.
So just to say a word about why do we care about this? Why do Unitarian Universalists care about class and classism? And I'm hoping that this morning's service helped shed some light on that. It's a topic that is grounded in our principles and values. It's also a topic that we have struggled with for a long time. So just like you said, Frank, we have this paradox that we live with. We have aspirational principles and values, and then we have the reality of being human in a world that is unjust. And so how do we work with that? And it's really the question of why do Unitarian Universalists care about justice? And we do because it's in line with our principles and values. At OUUC, it's also in line with what we say is our mission, which is an interconnected world, an interconnected web, WEB. And there were words that the congregation came up with to reflect that. Welcome and wonder, embrace and empower, bridge and become. Those words are OUUC's mission, and I think you can see how class and classism and any injustice are part of why we exist as a community.
So in terms of some things that UUs are doing now to address this, On your handout, there are some different links of resources. Justice Washington is a statewide organization doing thoughtful, welcoming work. So checking out that website. They connect people with current issues, opportunities. They hold in-person and online summits with guest speakers, share information, help people engage. So their president, if you email them, they will connect you with about any question, justice question you have. So thanks to them for sharing the next link, which was the UUs for a Just Economic Community. That's a national organization connected us to the final link, which has the curriculum that I got some definitions for. If you wanted to check out that final link, it has a whole curriculum that you can peruse. Then UU Class Conversations is really focused on classism as opposed to economic justice. They have caucus groups really focusing on classism. The next three links are really expansive resources. One of them, you can trace your class path in a simplified version, but that's the Trace My Class Path, just for some handrails to explore this work. There's a Showing Up for Racial Justice link, which has all sorts of work from their poor and working class group. Really helpful considerations to be aware of. So, you're going to talk about OUC specifically?
And just a call out for what's currently going on here that we hope you'll be interested in becoming a part of. Under the priority or the focus of faith in action, there have been a number of groups, and there are still, that have focused on particular issues that are some part of this grand, amazing scheme that is classism. Anne mentioned economic justice, having to do in terms of the people involved today here with homelessness and housing issues, and others working on racism and white supremacy. Still others starting to work on the issues about to be forthcoming in the world of immigration in our country, even more so than have been. And what we're hoping is that if you have a specific focus under the general rubric of classism, that you'll bring it to the folks that are involved and bring others with you to work together here on the kinds of issues that will advance our participation in trying to bring an end to this ism in particular, but all isms. And you can do so by, can we have the next one, please? The next slide, please. There we go. There is, for example, there's a social justice team which brings together the two main focuses that I mentioned, housing and homelessness and racism. And also the work that is being done by many people, particularly Anne Young, Joanne, thank you, on food insecurity, largely through feeding all sorts of groups in our society, in our community. We currently are meeting on the 4th of Tuesday of each month, but that's negotiable. It's a small group at the moment. We're very much looking for others to join us and to, as I say, bring their additional interests to the conversation.
So this can feel like a big topic and just a giant mountain that we can't possibly climb. And the invitation for us is, what's one thing I can do? And Joanne Young is wonderful about that. I can bring food. I can do that once a week, once a month, whatever. I can bring food. That's what I can do to help. And people will get fed because of what Joanne does. And that's what we can do, is what's our thing as individuals, and what's our thing as a community. So mindful of your time, we'll want to close. What I would say is please connect with Tim and Anne and Reverend Sarah and I, if there's particular things that you think would be helpful around this topic that we could do in our community, or things that you might be interested in partnering with to do and increase this awareness. There's lots of things we do, including book studies and classes and those kinds of things. There's the practical things that we do, and we're really interested in the conversation about how else we might increase our awareness personally and as a community around this topic. And so we'll extinguish our chalice as we close out today with an excerpt from a poem called A House Called Tomorrow by Alberto Rios. From those centuries, we human beings bring with us the simple solutions and songs, the river bridges and star charts and song harmonies, all in service to a simple idea, that we can make a house called tomorrow. What we bring finally into the new day every day is ourselves. And that's all we need to start. That's everything we require to keep going. Look back only for as long as you must, then go forward into the history you will make. Be good, then better. Make us proud, and make yourself proud. And those who came before you, when you hear thunder, hear it as their applause. Thank you, everyone.